everybody. I'm super excited today to have a guest on my show. His name is Asa Santiago, and I know him through Facebook. And I love the things that he posts because he is one of the, or maybe the only person online talking about polarity, relationships, and hormones, and how there is such an connection between the two. So I'm slowly learning from him. I already know a little bit about hormones, but nothing near what he knows and understands, all the research that he's done. So, Asa, thank you for being here. I'd love for you to tell my audience more about you and what you do.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Allison. Yeah, my name is Asa Santiago. I started on my health journey to try to figure out my own problems because of some illness I had from birth. Long story short, I fell in love with a girl and it didn't work out, and I just fell right on my face. And I thought like, hey, why don't I just improve my health? And so I did, and I obsessed about that, and that's how I got this crazy amount of education on epidemiology, psychology, and endocrinology, which would be like hormone study. I've been doing that kind of study for at least 9 years now. It might even be 10 now. But I have more of a focus on hormones these days. I used to focus mostly entirely on gut health for people because that was the big one for me. I had clinical depression, chronic anxiety, and all kinds of bodily issues prior to working toward my health and actually getting better. So the first stages that I had applied, where I did some gut cleansing, I got rid of those mental health problems. And it wasn't until like more recently in the last 3.5 years, actually might be 4 years now, I found better hormonal health. I changed in personality. I did this really big experiment where I all of a sudden became a lot more masculine in the way that I think and the way that I do things. And I started becoming attracted to very feminine women, and for me to be the leader within those relationships. In the past, it was the opposite. To be frank, I was the complete opposite. I was more of the submissive guy in the relationship with these very dominant women. And I didn't awaken from that until my body changed. It wasn't, I had always my whole life recognized that what I was interested in wasn't normal, but I still couldn't will myself out of it. It's just like, this is what it is. It's what I like. It's what my body says. Now my body doesn't want that anymore. So I've generally created a business around helping people do the same, where they can polarize to some extent, where they can get their bodily chemistry to become like a feminine woman or a masculine man. And I'm very familiar with all kinds of uh, problems that people have that preclude them from being polarized. One might be a woman with endometriosis or a woman with PCOS, or a man who has mercury toxicity and then therefore maybe ADHD. There's all kinds of factors involved that can make it so polarity is very challenging for a person on a bodily level. And so that's the basis of what I do is I help people with their hormonal health to get to a place similar to me, and how now I can lead within a relationship and feel good about that and actually desire it, and to just that be the only thing that I'm attracted to. So,
Mhm. Yeah, I really love what you share and everything that I've learned from you so far because I believe that femininity is not a costume. It's not something that you can just fake or look a certain way and all of a sudden you're feminine. And so to take that to the extreme is what you talk about, which is that there's an actual chemical, biological, physiological reason for people who are feminine or for men that are more masculine. I think everybody understands hormones generally. Everybody knows about testosterone and estrogen, but what you talk about goes even deeper than that. And you just mentioned mercury, and I know you've talked about the gut biome and how that plays into everything. I mean, I've heard you talk about things that to me are so specific and you just don't hear people talking about minerals like copper and what that has to do with polarity. And so that's why I really wanted to have you on my show to interview you so you could share some of these not so talked about things about like your gut, for example. Do you want to just jump into something like that to explain how the gut biome can like affect your relationship? It's just they seem to our culture it sounds like two totally separate things, but from what you've been talking about, they're actually quite related. So I'll just let you teach us a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah, everything's connected. It's you can't have one way without the other. Um, Examples and like when you think about your gut health, there's everything that you put in your body ends up in the gut, and the gut is what you put in a lot of ways. So if you put in a bunch of junk food and a bunch of excess sugar, there's all these colonies of microbes that grow in excess uh, in an imbalance. And you might call this what's called dysbiosis, where you have an imbalance of, like, say, a bunch of fungus in there or parasites, and these microbes end up uh, negatively impacting our health with the toxins they produce. Like, you might call them metabolites scientifically, where they metabolize food and it turns into an excretion, and then it's in some ways they could be neurotoxic or genotoxic, and they're fairly destructive to the system. And when this occurs, you can end up having mental health problems. Mental health problems directly affect your relationships. I know this. When I had depression, I was so much more reliant on the love of an individual, because I needed them to lift me up. And if I had anxiety, that they being around would help quell the anxiety. It's an added expectation onto the lover that's not necessary. It's not good. I see women do this all the time. And it's usually women who end up with the anxiety package of needing to have a man around all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when a woman, though, is able to abate that anxiety, say, for instance, she has enough serotonin production, or maybe she's sufficient in what's called androgens, male hormones, she can fight off things like fear and anxiety to get to more of a medium, to where it's not such a strong reliance on the individual being there. However, I'm not against the man and the woman needing one another to some extent. It's more about not being so desperate like you're a child.
Yeah.
Like
It's
that you
codependent. You're talking about codependency versus just the normal levels of needing one another and having that interdependence where you do have a need for one another, but it's like you said, it's not like a desperation. Like if you leave me, I'm gonna die like that.
yeah. Yep. Yep. And some people feel that way when they have chronic anxiety, and it's very sad. And I've been there. I know what that's like. Uh, but in general, these functions are physiological. It's physical. It's in your body. Your hormones generally regulate why you even are attracted to a man as a woman, or why a man is attracted to a woman. It's the basis for everything in that matrix. So when the hormones aren't working as they should, you can end up with all different kinds of things going on in your body, from the way that you attract to things, to the way that you feel when people say certain things, to the traumas that you encounter in a day. So how you eat is very, very, very important, and that affects your gastrointestinal health. And there are certain foods that help you essentially have ideal, say, serotonin production, or oxytocin, or to produce endorphins when you need them. And
Mhm.
there are cofactors that are required. You need to have a certain threshold of nutrients to be able to make that happen. And then people to this day argue to death what the best diet is, because they're talking about, like, well, all these plants can give you all these nutrients, right? And then those nutrients can then be therefore turned into the neurotransmitters that you need. So, I could just continue to eat broccoli every day, and that's it, only broccoli, because it has all these nutrients in it. And, like, well, there's a lot more evidence that shows about like how much we actually absorb from those foods. Okay, so the tissue retention from an egg is like 48%. From a soybean, it's 13%. Okay, so if the soybean had this amount of protein, you're only getting 13% of that protein from that soybean. Now, if you were to eat an egg, you get 48% of that nutrient profile. So it's important to keep into context the, how your body is absorbing those foods. And actually, too, someone made a post recently about how only 30 to 40 grams of protein can actually be assimilated per meal. And while that's true of nutritional research that exists regarding looking at omnivorous eating patterns, where people are eating quite a bit of carbohydrates with their meals, it may not be the same for people who have a bunch of bacteria that are leaning more acidic to where they can help you digest a lot of meat at one time. It can be very much possible that you can end up acquiring more protein within that meal. But it's going to be context based, and we're waiting on literature for that because there's not many studies on people who are eating more Paleolithic or like entirely like just meat and seeing how that affects their retention of protein. So there's a lot that goes into gastrointestinal health is what I'm trying to say, and people have different arguments as far as like how you should be eating and what you should be doing to maximize on that health. Okay, but anything that can help you produce optimal neurotransmitters is the answer, because the neurotransmitters are your hormones that signal to your brain to give you optimal mental health, and the optimal mental health equates to optimal endocrine health, hormonal health. It's a big cascade. If you have poor mental health, it can affect every single aspect of your body, everything. You can drive up your cortisol just because you're highly anxious and you're worried about things on a regular basis. Everything's connected, and your external life too. So if you have a lot of stressors externally, you're a woman who decides to go and work all the time, or you have to, and you're stuck in fight or flight, right? This has it's there for a reason. You're supposed to be able to survive as a woman, but you're not supposed to keep surviving all the time like that, because then you can have situations like endometriosis. Because what can happen is cortisol becomes a necessity to be in constant circulation, and the pregnenolone that's used as a cofactor to produce the progesterone is used for the cortisol as opposed to the progesterone, which is supposed to balance the estrogen that can cause a woman to produce more of the endometrial lining outside of the uterus. So that's where it can be a really big, complicated issue, is that if you're consistently going through fight or flight. And so that's my take on it through the research that I've done. You can take it or leave it, but that's what I've noticed. And then PCOS would be a completely different one. That also applies to gut health. So all these things are super connected. To finish it off, though, I found that there are some emotional wounding, kinds of emotional wounding that can affect our gastrointestinal health too. So, like polycystic ovarian syndrome, I tend to see women who have bad relationships with dad or the masculine in general, and they can tend to have that. And it could also be a survival mechanism where they had to become a man, and then more of the cysts might form to produce more androgens, because for you to survive, you kind of have to be a man. And that's just kind of a reality today in terms of hormones and how they work. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of a good overview. I could go way deeper in that, but
Yeah, I love it. I was wondering if you could say more about oxytocin and some of the brain hormones that allow a couple to feel really bonded, and how to maybe activate them, or what do you recommend? Like if you were working with a couple, how could you support them to have more of those really like yummy hormones happening?
yeah, it's really important that people produce like the four big ones. You got your dopamine, you got your serotonin, you got your endorphins, and then you got the oxytocin. Okay. Women are obviously going to be having a higher circulation of oxytocin in their system. And you probably heard about that argument about pair bonding and like women producing more oxytocin to then kind of make it so they're stuck with one guy that they are intimate with,
Mhm.
to create like a sense of loyalty. And I believe this is for a survival purpose, that
Mhm.
it is more ideal for her to just kind of stick with the one guy for optimal upbringing. And now, arguably, like why the guys are not the same can also do with survival, but that's a completely different argument. But guys still produce oxytocin. They still, to an extent, bond, but it's not the same as women. Um, but like the oxytocin is a really good one. You could definitely get that just by having physical touch. You produce oxytocin that way through love languages, feeling in any way connected with another person, and like complimenting them or giving them a hug, kissing your lover, um, spending time together, acts of service, things that just really create the connection. These are all aspects of oxytocin production and are important. That's kind of, it's like the lifestyle hormone of keeping people alive for longer. I definitely believe oxytocin is central to that. I think of those blue zones that exist out there that people talk about where people live longer. It's, I believe, connected back to the way that people live their lives and how happy they might be. And
Mhm.
oxytocin is definitely central to that. So another one might be endorphins. Endorphins, you want to get up during the day, you want to go out and do a run, or you want to go and fight something, whatever. That would be what a guy would do. But like for a woman, going and I don't know, out here we have these gigantic dunes, and you'll see people work out by running up the dunes. Like that's a good workout. You can get your endorphins going that way. Um, it is really good for women to exercise. It is super important. So getting endorphins going could be really great. Um, and then
I
to
do, Asa. My morning routine is so simple. I take a walk every day. Unfortunately, where I live, I have this big giant hill to walk up at the end of my walk. So I'm sweating. I try to walk a little bit faster each day, and I've been doing this. There was a time where I kind of got out of the routine, and I really noticed the difference now that I'm doing it every single morning. And then I also have a vibration plate machine right here next to me, and I stand on that for 10 minutes and do really light weights. And my mood is changed so much. I'm sleeping better, and these are just really simple things. I'm not driving out to the gym and spending an hour doing a whole complicated routine. Oh, and I wanted to apologize too. There's some background noise for my audience, just to let you know what this is. There's a worker here fixing our deck, so the timing is not perfect, but hopefully you can't hear it. But I really do notice that. So when you're working with clients, is exercise part of what you help them integrate into their lifestyle?
Yeah, exercise is an absolute. I've gotten a lot more serious about it over the last couple of years because I myself have underestimated it. I used to be like a real purist about diet and how it can fix anything, but you can't subtract everything within the whole equation that is the blueprint of life. It's all very, very important. So I have people frequently get sun exposure and to do the lifestyle routines involved with exercise and to eat well. Also pursuing ideal relationships like masculine men with feminine women and feminine women with masculine men. These are all parameters that raise health by exponential amounts. Like I can't say that there are biomarkers associated with the masculine men and feminine women thing, but I could tell you with an absolute certainty it's the truth. Because if you look at the literature that talks about testosterone going up or estradiol going up, it increases the life source of that person. And if you also look at other literature where if you see the skateboarder study where guys are getting higher testosterone when they're performing in front of pretty women, okay, well, they're technically enhancing their lives by getting higher testosterone. Like it's just you can make these arguments by connecting all the dots in the literature that exists. So I'll take that to my grave. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I will say from my experience talking to feminine women really gets me going and it really makes me feel a lot better. That's why I made that post about the muse. A man is so much less without the muse. Like he can obviously be a worker ant and go and like work all the time and make money while he's alone, but if he has nothing to work toward, like no like Mulan movie style woman that they're fighting for, like that song where they're looking to fight for a woman, and that's big. If they have some woman to work to or work toward, or they have a woman that they're protecting, it's very important for a man, and they can definitely see probably higher health parameters in doing so when they have that kind of purpose in mind. So
And then how does, maybe this is a little off topic, but because my audience is probably 90% women, how does respecting and appreciating a man who is providing and working really hard and creating, the income and the provision to make sure that she can have a safe environment to raise her children, how could, how might her respect and appreciation of him affect him with like the hormones and the brain chemicals and things that we're talking about?
I think in general, it would be like more of an organic dopamine, where men today get a lot of inorganic dopamine. It's going to generally probably give him oxytocin too, even potentially serotonin levels, because there's like this peace of mind that like he's not dealing with a disrespectful woman. And his cortisol is going to go down, which will allow for more open, more of like an ability for him to have more free flowing testosterone. So that's another thing with polarity, is that like you can shoot your cortisol up through an argument or some kind of like kind of wall within the relationship. But when it's all free flow, the hormones just go like this, and people start to go into this whole matrix of polarity where you got the female hormones are going as they should and the male hormones are going as they should between the sexes, and then the people are universally just happy or united together. So for a woman to affect a man, showing respect would be very good for him. It'd make him feel like, wow, his mood would go up, his maybe even endorphins potentially, uh, because when men get inspired by women, they could potentially make it, a little sexual, and it might kind of get them going to want to do something. And so intimacy can happen and those hormones can come about, which would be a lot of oxytocin, endorphins as well. There's all kinds of things. So context based for sure, but a lot of guys would find that kind of organic dopamine to be great, and it probably comes really strongly from women. I don't know of literature that, because like the literature doesn't really talk about specifically masculine men and feminine women.
Yeah.
There's just men and women. And even then they're trying to like, it's not even super specific then. It's like it's hard to kind of see stuff that's specific to men and women.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so just as a whole, if I were to bring it all together, I could safely say that when a woman is respectful to a man and makes him, feel like what he's doing is the right thing, and gives him extra reinforcement and is like a cheerleader to him, he will absolutely end up with better health parameters across the board, which your hormones will be very much involved in. He would likely raise his testosterone, and it just as a whole too. I don't know about. There's also that auditory cortex thing that I posted about once upon a time, where, if a woman speaks to a man, uh, the first reaction through the auditory cortex is for him to translate that to music, not so much like another man telling him something about some logic. So I imagine today when women are talking like men, it's like a physiological problem. And so when they're talking more like in an artistic, feminine communication fashion of like feeling and energy and emotion, it it's a very strongly positive response to them. It's like they're experiencing music.
Oh, I
So
love that. That's so
yeah,
cool.
and that's really why I bring it back down to calling the cheerleader the muse. She's a point of inspiration for a man, and a lot of women underestimate that inspiration can literally just be her walking around. Literally, that's it. Like you're wearing a cute clothing and you're just smiling. That can be
Mm-hmm.
inspiration. You could be inspiring by like just giving him extra eye contact in the conversation. I can't tell you how many times this gets screwed up, where women are really disengaged, or like they're really not paying attention to him and listening to him, and like really like, you could say the same for men, but it's not the same. Men are wanting to feel respected. It's disrespectful for a woman to be disengaged. So it's really important for her to be there and interested in him. I also, this is another problem I see, is women can struggle a lot with shame. So they end up not um, being as vulnerable, and by like giving compliments, or like saying things, or like maybe liking his post, or like being really supportive of his post, even if you don't even fully agree with it. Like, I still love this man, even though I don't understand his post, but I'm still going to keep supporting him. And it's kind of like this, it's a shamelessness, but it's also like a little bit of twisting reality. Women, in a lot of ways, aren't here on Earth living reality. They are up there living in the kind of the dream world. They're crossing lines that don't exist to them. And so it's not to say that like women are like the birthplace of all lies in the world, but they could definitely contort things to make everything feel softer and better, even if it's not realistic. And that's what the men like. The men want this woman to be this unit of the house that makes everyone feel good. And even if it's not reality, like it's kind of like my mom told me this story about, I don't know if it's really true or not, because people have these opinions on what happened during the Holocaust, but the Romani, which are apparently my bloodline, they were in concentration camps with the Nazis, and it was troubling times for them. They were obviously caught up and then around a fire, and it was miserable. But they would just sing and dance and have fun regardless. They would just find this means of, even in the darkest moment, still being really inspirational and happy, and just like keeping things into perspective. And so that's like the role of what the woman is. She's this expression. She's this, I don't, she's not a part of the physical world so much. She's kind of displaced from that. She's thinking about the dream, the higher purpose. And so she can separate herself from the absolute misery here and be like, hey, think about it this way artistically. And she's really positive, even if it's not set in total reality, because the guy is supposed to bring everyone to reality. The guy is supposed to be like, these are the facts, the cold hard facts. We are not going to be able to, do this thing that you have in your mind, because it's not reality. But he will still appreciate what the woman brings in terms of what's not realistic, because it's bringing a better mood, which a man can argue, if he's smart enough, that the mood raising is actually more efficient. So a man in his little reality, where everything is, blocky and square and perfect and, you know, all set in realism, he's underestimating potentially what the woman's role is and how it can make everything more efficient. How with elevated mood, he can make 3 times the money he was before, or than he was before. And these things are often underestimated. And women for themselves underestimate their ability to do this for men, to be able to get them to do those things without it seeming like total manipulation. All they really need to do or be is inspiring. Be like this point, this cheerleader, the point of inspiration, the muse. And and a big part of that too is a relative need for the man. If he really feels like you don't need him, and he's like an accessory, it's not the same experience. It's just basically you're with a roommate that you get intimate with, and you don't need him. And that's why I try to argue in terms of like my content in the paid group is like, there's a survival component to polarity. Polarity at its truest form is a state of survival, where you have the woman who is relying on the man to go get food while she's taking care of the kids back at the camp. And you're both in it to win it together, and you're both trying so hard to survive. And that creates a harmonious, beautiful dynamic. Um, So it can be really great to like really rely on a man to it's not to say that you'll be able to manufacture it to that extent, but you can definitely get there to a decent amount because women today can technically go and get a job and be a barista at the very least and be able to survive. But you know, I do try to get like because I've worked with a lot of women in corporate power positions. I'm like, okay, you know, it might be better to let go of that and just settle for something a little smaller. Maybe do something toward a purpose, like helping people, like what Allison is doing, and where she's teaching people things about femininity. This is really great. It's purpose driven. Um, so just in general, like you could survive, but it would be great to like give the more masculine provider burden to the man, to where a woman can focus more on the other side, the feminine side of things, the relaxation side. So anyway, that's it. I'm off my tangent there.
I love it. I love it so much, and it's so like relatable to my life because I'm married to a very masculine man, and he's done nothing but provide for me so that I can do things like helping women cultivate their radiance and learn feminine communication. And if he was just sitting around playing video games or something, and I was the one who had to go over to Silicon Valley and work 80 hours a week or something, our marriage would be over. I mean, we would have lasted maybe 3 or 4 years like that because it's so against my natural instinct to do something like that. And conversely, his natural instinct is to work hard and provide. So for us, it's been really great, especially once I learned how to respect him. And that's another thing that I teach my clients is how men need to be respected, and what we think as respect is not necessarily what they perceive as respect. And so that's another thing that I do. So everything you've said today was so awesome, and I'm going to have you back on the show, and I want to invite the audience to leave some questions for Asa, or I'm going to leave his contact information and the information for his paid membership, which is a ridiculous low price right now. Jump in now because it won't always be this cheap because it's pretty new. So I have a strong feeling that you're going to be raising the price for that, Asa, because you provide so much value. And so tell the audience a little bit about what they could expect if they were to join your paid group.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. Basically, what's included so far is I'm creating a sisterhood and brotherhood chat group now, where you can kind of rely on fellow women within a sisterhood to talk with one another and kind of engage one another. And you might see Allison in there. And there's the other aspects are like the live Q&A I do per week. A handful of people to one person might be in there, and it's a great way to be able to get me to give you advice for like a whole hour. That's an extremely valuable thing because a lot of people pay me a lot of money for the one-on-one calls, and so that's the one thing that's kind of like at this stage of the game when you're just paying for like a premium group and it's not full of like thousands of people right now. This is kind of like where the money is like being able to kind of get a personalized take on things. The only aspect of that is that I need to record it, and so everyone else can see it. So it's not technically one-on-one. But yeah, so we do those both through like health Q&As, polarity Q&As, and then we weekly do kind of a feminine communication activity or any kind of polarity activity. It's mostly feminine communication activities because there's more women interested in these activities than men. But there are definitely men who get involved, and there's men who have been getting involved. So that's been pretty cool. But men are going to be less partial to being vulnerable to like comment on posts like that and just kind of just express themselves right away and just go into a role play for everyone to see. Um, so there's that aspect that a lot of
Let
people.
me just, I just want to focus on that for a minute. I want to highlight that because if you join the paid group, this is something that a lot of my audience asks me for a lot is like examples, real life examples. And I really love getting them from you, Asa, the feminine communication and masculine communication role plays, because A, you're very creative. I love the scenarios that you develop. And then, when you ask the ladies, like, what would you say in this situation? And then you provide what a man would say. And I think it's very, very needed and very helpful. And it's something that my audience in my private group, they're always asking me for stuff like this. And this is not really my area of expertise. I work more on like the internal shifts that need to happen first before you even open your mouth. Like, what has to happen when you have to let go of control, not trying to get the outcome. But so I really do think that you're going to get a lot of people joining from my audience because they're really looking for something like that, and it's really fun. You're writing a book, I think, too, and you just have so many skills that
Thanks,
really
Allison.
shine in the way that you speak and write and share and teach. It's just incredible.
That's great. Yeah, see, ladies, Allison's a really great cheerleader. Like, I feel
Yes,
really good every time she talks.
I am
Uh,
cheerleading a lot, aren't I?
yeah. Um, but yeah, so that's one aspect that a lot of women like in the group that keeps the group pretty active is the weekly activity. And then there's the 2 monthly courses that I release. So I'll do a health course and I do a psychology slash polarity related course. And those are pretty more they're more in depth. They can either be a video or written and video. It just really depends on the on what it is. Um, in general, like one I wrote one as like an extra. Well, not as an extra. It was that so there was this one that I did about how survival or provision is biodegradable. So that one is really interesting to a lot of people because a lot of women get the false perception of how much money a man needs to make and how much comfort a woman needs. And so I put in perspective like how you could run a polarized relationship with very little, and for you to still feel respect toward him and for him to feel inspiration from you while you guys have are like on the poverty line. It's all possible.
Right.
So I talk about those things, and then we kind of, other aspects of like relating it down to, survival mechanisms of like how that works biologically, and it's all cool stuff. So the core stuff I do, and I do like polarity basics courses, and I do health basics courses on like how to keep your endocrine health optimal. Um, but yeah, just a lot of interesting stuff there. So courses, and then I also make semi-daily posts in the health section and the polarity section. So I'll just bring in, like, if I'm posting something in the free group, I might expand on it. So there's some complicated subjects that just are too ambiguous to people when I just make it in a small text block. So I'll expand on it in the premium group, and then we go into those discussions. And then in the health stuff, I might share some more about like some examples of my clients that I'm working with, or I might just talk about a health topic as it stands alone. And yeah, so stuff like that, all kinds of different things. But that's pretty much the base of the group. It's about right now it's $19 a month. It's pretty
That's pretty
affordable.
incredible.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so
Especially
that's
you answer so many questions. I mean, you're in there every day answering people's questions. It could be even something that you didn't write about. It could be about a type of parasite or, a supplement or something. And like you answer the questions right away. So I really appreciate that about you.
yeah, thanks. And it's also the last thing is I'm writing a book, like you said. I'm almost done with it. I just have one more chapter. It's just like the final chapter. It's basically, whatever people's beliefs are, but it's kind of like a story of me coming to God, so to speak, and connecting all the connecting that back to like polarity and like how I masculinized and how I used to be as more of a submissive guy. And so it's showing my growth journey there, and then showing kind of more of the chemistry and like all the scientific view of like how polarity might exist in the world, all the psychology on it. I'm also releasing the archetypes in this book. The archetypes we already talk in depth in the premium group. I'm going to be releasing more of that, but basically the archetype structure is very fascinating because it's going to be how you can determine if a guy that you're dating or as like a prospect is a potential danger to you, or it could be something that's really great for you. Because it will kind of give you the knowledge as far as like what their upbringing was like and how that's going to show up in your relationship. There's a lot of guys out there who are very masculine presenting, as an example, and they're the guys who are trying to be masculine, but like they're stuck in the feminine side of their mind a lot of the time, and so they can be prone to deception, and they can end up doing things that are inconsistent, and they might at the front seem very much like the consistent guy you're looking for, but then as it starts to get more normalized, they show themselves. So I help ladies to determine right away what guys are going to be like that. I help them develop the cues and understand like if they are in that archetype. And though too to be understanding of these people to where like okay, they might be very much progressed. Like me, I'm within that archetype you'd want to watch out for, which is the I call it the manifestor. It's the guy who has a central focus on the feminine side of the mind, um, but is having to develop the masculine on his own or through like some external integration. And so he's going to be more capable of doing boy-like things and being inconsistent and not being so like such a steady rock in your life. He might struggle with self-discipline and be really challenged to be a leader. But he can also, too, because he's potentially very expressive and creative, be able to act like a man. So those archetypes can eventually climax to being like a balanced archetype. And I explain that all in the book and all in the group. So anyway, I just wanted to say that there's this cool system that I have that can very much benefit you, and you might find out what your archetype is and how you are going to end up orienting yourself toward dating, because there are women who are an archetype who end up looking for a muse out of a man, or there are women who are looking for the dad out of a man. And so there's all kinds of intermixed things there that are kind of disturbing polarity for people, and it's important for them to acknowledge those points so they can kind of find the right way forward. But
Oh
anyway,
my
yeah,
gosh. Your mind is quite interesting, and that's why I wanted to have you as a guest. So thank you, Asa. Thank you for being here today, and I can't
thanks,
wait to
Alice.
have you back. Maybe in a month or two, we'll do a follow up to today's conversation.
Sweet.
Thanks again.